welcome to the Artistry House, the home of the British Institute of Professional Photography. I'm Martin, and we've got another one of our three favourite things. And today on the line, we've got the wonderful Emily Hancock, who's one of our directors and equestrian photography. So, Emily, good afternoon, good morning, whatever time it is, I'm not sure.
Hi, Martin. How are you doing?
I'm very good. Oh, that's a different voice than you were just speaking in. Is that your
well,
posh?
you know.
We're posh anyway, but that's even posher. So Emily, we want you to, before we take a look at your images, just tell us a bit about your business model, what you do to make a living, and how you got into photography.
Okay, so I got into photography over 20 years ago now. I just decided one day I was going to be a photographer, and that was the mission, and I put my head down and worked hard. My career has always had a consistency where I photographed horses, but it has kind of moved about within equine photography. So I started off by doing equine events, you know, pony clubs, show jumping, cross country, that sort of thing. And then I wanted to specialize a bit more, so I started doing private commissions, and much like you do a family portrait session, I was doing commissions for mostly mummies would commission me to photograph their daughters and their ponies. And I used to travel all over the country doing that, and then as I progressed, I then started to photograph horses more from an art perspective. So I took the people out of the photographs and was photographing around the world more interesting breeds of horses and characters. And then I got my first fellowship with a panel of equine images, and then I started to do quite a lot of training off the back of that. So lots of people wanted to learn how to run a successful equine photography business, and that's quite a big chunk of what I do now. But I also sell work globally, so I license pieces and have private and commercial collectors. Yes. So I have a few different streams, and the last kind of 8 to 10 years I've really explored mixed media art, so always having photography as a foundation, but then enhancing my work using other mediums.
So, I mean, that's actually a huge. I've probably learned more about you there in the last couple of minutes, and I know you. I believe I know you quite well as one of our directors, and obviously you were interim CEO of the BIPP for 6 months, was it?
Yep, 6 months.
6 months. So wow, good job.
Oh yeah, I sort of forgot all about that bit.
So yeah, the training. I know that we've had a lot of. Your mentorees or your trainees have come through now and done very successful. So, so you obviously think that it's important that the qualification, the 3-tier qualification program that we run at the Institute is important for your mentorees once they've done your training to get on. Maybe you can talk a little bit more why you believe that is.
Yeah, it's very important actually, and more so than the actual getting the qualification, the process in which you have to go through as an artist to understand really what you're seeing in your images. You know, when you take the photographs, you're emotionally attached to them. So if an image, a particular image you enjoyed taking, it went well, you may look at that favorably, but when you're talking from an assessor's point of view, you know, and critically considering that image and how it's made up, you know, they can be quite different. So the process in which any of my mentees have to go through in order to get their qualification is so valuable, and they really grow as photographers by going through that process. So I do encourage it, because actually it changed me as a photographer, and it made me 100 times better, because I was looking at my work in a very different way.
Yeah, and the other thing that I found interesting is that when we've obviously I'm not on the qualifications panel, but I'm there generally on the day as the the tea making boy, really, if I'm completely honest. But one of the interesting things I found in the judges' comments about, I mean, they don't know that the people going for qualifications are your mentorees, but one of the things that does come out is that the supporting evidence that people who've been on your courses is fantastic. It really is. I don't know if you knew that. I don't know if I've ever told you.
Well, I didn't know that specifically, but I have seen the supporting evidence that has come from my mentees. And I think presentation as a whole is very important. And so not just the actual photographs, but everything, like you say, the supporting evidence, everything surrounding it also needs to have the same attention to detail. When I'm teaching about equestrian photography, we talk always about having our ducks in a row. And if one of them is not in its row, you know, it breaks the trust for your clients. And so when you're putting forward a submission and you're presenting your work, you have to have everything of the same quality, the same standard. So if your supporting evidence does not have the same attention given to it, then that could really let you down.
Yeah, no, it's really important. So we're going to have a look at your 3 favourite images that you've taken. I'm just going to share a screen so everybody can see. And I have to say, before I share this is not what I was expecting at all. And I think I said to you before, again, we speak all the time about stuff regarding the Institute, but I've never really talked about your work. And I've not yet seen your fellowship panel, which hopefully one day I'll get to see that. But it's not what I expected as in equestrian photography to be. It's very beautiful. It is art. It is. I can see this on somebody's wall. I can see this as a limited edition. It is absolutely beautiful.
So this image was shot in California, and the horse was basically, we were on a huge farm, acres and acres and acres of land, and we were running this one horse up and down this ridge line. So I had the sky, a grey sky for a background, and we had two owners. So one of them would lead the horse up the hill. Well, it wasn't a hill, but it did slope down. And one of the other owners was at the bottom with a bucket of feed, nuts for the horse. And they would let it loose off the top, and it would gallop from one end of the field to the other across this ridge. And it was just the most magical experience, one being in California. I think it was about 6 o'clock in the morning. And I was kind of having one of those moments of, is this what I do for a job? This is like cool, but behind that, so other than the actual image itself of the horse rearing, for me it's special because then I go through a process, and this was my first experience with encaustic medium, which is wax. And I printed this image out massive, and then I started to paint over it with wax. So a very kind of physical process. I had melted loads of wax, and I start putting it all over the image, and then I was re-photographing it, and then putting it back on the computer and working on it a bit and reprinting it, and then continued to add layers and layers of wax over the top of it, re-photograph it, put it back in the computer and reprint it again. And so the reason this image is special is because this was my first experience of building up my encaustic series, which in fact made up my second fellowship panel, a series of images that are run with this theme, where their first photographs turned into wax works and then reprinted as photographs.
Of course, I've never heard of that expression before, or that style. That's again, you learn something every day, don't you? That's incredible. And the people you shot this for in California, I would imagine they have this as a piece of art on the.
Yes, yeah. This piece actually sells really well. Actually, it goes out generally as a big 30-inch by 30-inch piece. And yeah, it does run as a limited edition, but it's used for other things as well. So yes, yeah, they love it.
Yeah, I bet they do. It's beautiful. It you know, to me, I would have said it was a painting when you sent it over. I was amazed by it. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have a look at your second most favourite image. He says, for some reason it won't. Yes. You know what? It's always going to be the case, isn't it? Just give me one sec. There we go. I'll just edit that bit out, don't you worry. Amazing. So this is mind-blowing. Tell me about this.
Okay, so I love this image because I got to a point in my career where I started to feel like I knew how to take pretty pictures of horses. You know, when you photograph a horse kind of looks like a horse, and there's not much disguising. It's a pretty horse running in a field. And I felt that I just didn't feel like creatively fulfilled photographing pretty horses running around, or, you know, in nice locations, or even with owners and horses. I felt this urge to want to try and do something more with a horse. So I've always wanted, I have actually always said that I probably would have been an artist had I been able to draw, which I feel like's a bit, you know, I'm like, what's the word? Turning my back on photography. But I did always have that sense that I wanted to be an artist. And so I started to work out how I could use my photography. So again, this is a photograph of a horse, but I have then layered it with illustrated flowers, hand painted, hand drawn, and put them together on the computer. Again, printed them out, worked on it by hand, re-photographed it, put it back in, and built up layers. And this is probably a favorite image as well, because a lot of people like it, and it does sit in a lot of homes, and it's been used for, you know, various companies and whatever. So the reason it's special to me is because I felt like I'd made the transition from a photographer to an artist by being able to produce this whilst merging my photography and my desire to be able to paint and draw.
And there's obviously quite a bit of retouching of Photoshop skill involved in this. Is that something you've kind of had to learn to get the results you wanted, or is it something that you were already, as a photographer, that you'd picked up along the way?
No, I am rubbish at processing. It takes me ages. I really fumble around a lot in Photoshop. I'm not, for anyone who knows me, I'm not really a techie person. I mean, my husband would call me techie because I'm able to do this. But when you look at the scale of photography techiness, I would be in the bottom 10%. Both with my camera and on Photoshop. So that it's a work in progress, my Photoshop skills.
Well, this is obviously a lot of work, and this is quite an amazing shot. So
thank you. And actually, sorry, just quickly, that horse was shot in Spain.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a nice Spanish Andalusian horse.
And your third image?
Yes. So this one's special to me because this was quite a monumental moment on my journey to becoming a bit different with what I produced. So I'd gone out on a creative shoot, and I'd organized these amazing horses, these amazing owners and venues, locations. And this was the end of a 12-hour photo shoot with this horse had started in the morning. He obviously had breaks throughout the day, but this was 12 hours later, and it was a real off the cuff. I'll tell you what, let's just try one last shot. I don't use flash typically for any of my work or with any horses. And we decided to go down into this lake that was on the property, and this amazing horse who would just stand there and to command do his little Spanish style walking and pouring at the water. And an assistant that had come with me, we had taken some lights because there was some stuff we were working on earlier in the day, and it was a very off the cuff, oh, should we just shove a light behind him, see what happens? And at that moment it started to rain, and this image pretty much came straight out of camera. There's not really anything actually, I've barely touched it in post-production, and it was kind of one of those moments where I was like, oh, I just wasn't expecting that. And it was like that kind of end of 12 hours hero shot that then, you know, kind of did the circuit, and people were going, oh, wow, that's amazing. And I just felt that it was a creative project. It was totally personal, so I wasn't getting paid a penny to do it. And I just feel that I always take leaps and bounds in my creativity when I go and organize my own stuff where I'm not being paid.
I was going to ask you that. Do you think it's important that you go and shoot your own personal projects as well as, obviously you do quite a lot for customers? And how often do you do that?
Well, 100% it's important, because like I said, every time I do a personal unpaid shoot, I take creative risks and then produce something that I wasn't expecting. How often I get to do it varies year on year depending on how busy I am. But at the minimum, I would be looking to do 3 big productions a year that were completely outside my comfort zone, you know, unknown locations. They take quite a lot of work and effort to put together because of the kind of production team that you need in order to organize it all. But so at the minimum 3 a year I would try and do.
And knowing you as I know you, Emily, I know that you're an incredibly organised person, so I'm sure you enjoy that part of it as well.
Yeah, I do. It's all mapped out minute by minute.
And this image is quite interesting, because at first I wasn't quite sure if the water droplets were actually rain or whether it was from the horse kicking, or actually they could even be stars in the sky.
Yeah. Or it could be photoshopped in, but it's not. It literally, it started to rain. Those last 5 seconds of that shoot, it just started to rain. I shot, the light went off, caught all the flickers, and it was the perfect end to the shoot, I have to say.
I really like the idea of the horses having a break. When you said that, in my mind, I could imagine them sat in a director's chair with their feet up like that, having a cup of coffee, saying, "What, we're on again?"
I definitely have the horse police on me if I said I'd been shooting for 12 hours non-stop with this horse. So no, he did have a break. He had lots of breaks.
Right, that's just my vivid imagination seeing it in his director's chair going, "What again?" Okay, so we also asked you to have an image that inspires you, or inspires you to pick up a camera, or inspires you in the start, or inspires you every day to be involved in photography. I know you've got a really great big book in front of you, haven't you? I have. Oh my goodness, it's this one. So it's called Wonderland, and it's by a photographer called Kirsty Mitchell. And I discovered her quite some years ago. I started to follow her social media channels, and I went back years actually, and I looked at her journey because I was really inspired by her work. My initial thoughts when I saw her work was, I could never do that, because she clearly has a massive budget, a huge production team, and, you know, anything, she obviously has it all at her fingertips. You can't do that unless you have that support and backing behind you.
So I started to look into her story, and she was doing it, I think, I mean, don't quote me on this, but I think she was doing it with her boyfriend and her best friend, and she worked a full-time job, and at the weekends they were spending long hours creating costumes for her photo shoots. And for a couple of years, more than a couple of years, she was working on the side trying to produce this project. And I'm just blown away by her work. I'll just randomly open a page and you can see. So she makes all her own costumes by hand. They take months. So she will have created, you know, all this fabric and headdress. I'll show you another.
I'm actually really going to look her up. When I'd never heard of her, and when you mentioned it before we started filming, it's just the pictures that you show me, just incredible. Yeah, amazing stuff.
So this shot particularly, she moved this boat into this location 6 months before the shoot happened, so that all the foliage could grow up around the boat. And she's videoed all her shots as well, so the production of them. So you can see the whole story of how all her images were created. But yeah, I'm just mega inspired, because actually she sort of proved that you don't need a massive budget, you don't need a massive team. You can just go out and create your own work by yourself on minimal budget, minimal time. Yeah, so Kirsty Mitchell.
Kirsty Mitchell, let's look her up. Brilliant, that is amazing, and beautiful images that Kirsty's done there. So we've got a couple of minutes left, and we've been asking to all the people that we spoke to about how they're getting on and what they're doing to prepare for the release of the lockdown. And I'm sure that a lot of people don't know, Emily, that you are obviously a very successful business person in the photography, but you also have another number of other businesses that I know you've kind of probably been pulling your hair out in, that the nurseries, and you've probably had well, I've spoke to you, and I know that you've had a tough, torrid time at the beginning of it, but at least you've got a smile on your face now. So
I do.
You've managed to get through it. So I was just wondering if you had to give advice, I mean, general advice, or if it's specifically photography, to help the members that watch this and to get through the next few weeks, what would that be?
I think as a creative, I tell this actually to all the students that come through training as equine photographers, that even 20, 25 years in, whatever it is now, as a creative, I still have massive highs and massive lows. And every 6 months to 8 months, I dip into this low where I go, I'm going to go get a normal job. I just can't. This whole creativity thing is driving me mad. And you know, often we're stuck in our heads. We've got all these ideas, all this stuff we want to do, but we haven't got the time, we haven't got the money, we haven't got this, that, and the other. And I think the advice would be just to know that, you know, you can go through these high and low periods. And overall, if you look at a creative career, it is so worth it, because the fulfillment, the freedom, I'm living the dream of being a creative person. And even though, you know, my husband and my mum, when I have these lows, I'll go, okay, I need to go find a normal job, and they physically help me. They'll get the laptops out and go, right, let's search for jobs. What do you think you want to be? A teacher, Emily? Or, I mean, what would match up? I mean, how could you find a job where you could have complete freedom of your diary, when you go in, what you do, how you do it, you know? And within 24 hours, I'm like, nah, well, I'll just go back to photography. It's fine. We'll stick with the creative life. And I think, you know, it's having resilience for those low times. And, you know, with the lockdown right now, it's important that we all stay strong in our minds, that this is, you know, our creative lives are what we really, really want. And I think, you know, coming out the other end, we just have to be really creative about how we get back to work. And I think multiple streams of income, there's no shame in having, you know, side jobs, or, you know, jobs that pay the bills. And I think, like, I have my photography, my training, I have another, couple of family businesses. They can all work side by side. And I think in order to keep the creative life, you have to be creative in how you make it work. So yeah, just keep going and be resilient, and know that those highs and lows come, and just ride the lows and you'll get to the next high.
Yeah. Well, and also, and I've kind of said this to such a lot of people, both privately and when we've been doing these interviews, that I live in a cul-de-sac, and every Thursday night we come out at 8 o'clock to clap from the NHS. My daughter's on the front line. She's a radiographer and seeing it every day. And talking to my neighbours, I mean, I live in a semi-detached house. I've got bank managers in my road. I've got a couple of people got their own businesses. But out of everybody, there's nobody actually out of work. They're all either on 100% salary at home, or they've been furloughed at 80%. And they're all saving money, and they've all got now more disposable income than they've ever had. And I'm not, I kind of feel sometimes I'm rubbing our members' faces in it, because I know that there's a lot of our members really struggling. They're a limited company who've been paying themselves £10,000 or £11,000 a year and then taking dividends, and they've really kind of fallen into a bit of a trap there. And also sole traders, that it's really dried up. I do think the government money's coming through now. I'm seeing in our Facebook community that people are getting now help, and I think that's taking a lot of pressure off people. There is going to be some kind of getting back to normality and social distance and things like that. But I think there will be a pent-up demand for people to celebrate with family and friends and have
100%.
photography done. And also they have money. The bank manager who lives across the road from me, he deals with businesses between 12 and 20 million pounds. And he said personally, he's never had as much money. He's actually saving more money, because he can't go out, he can't go for dinner, he can't go to the cinema, and he's nothing to spend his money on. So I do think there is light at the end of the tunnel, and I think people have just got to stay positive.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, isn't it? I think the photographers that are able to stay positive, and really, when we are back up and running, they go after the opportunities and try and focus in on that, will do better, because that they're going to create, that they're going to put themselves out there, and be able to capture the ready market that is going to be waiting.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Brilliant. Emily, that was fantastic. We managed to do it without your children coming screaming in as you thought they might do.
Yeah.
They're good children. They've had homeschooling this morning. You've probably tired the brains out. So
yes, exactly that.
Thank you so much for doing this for us, and we'll speak to you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.